The morning rush at the downtown cafe was brutal. Coffee orders shouting over each other, plates clattering, and the endless hum of voices that never seemed to stop. The smell of espresso and fresh pastries filled the air, but behind the counter, Emily barely noticed. Her hands were sore, her apron stained, and her manager's sharp tone echoed in her head. "Smile more, Emily. Customers pay for service, not sympathy." She forced a polite grin anyway. That's what the job demanded. Not kindness, just performance. The door chimed, and the crowd barely noticed the frail old woman stepping inside. She moved slowly, clutching a small purse, her gray hair tucked under a worn scarf. She looked lost, out of place among the shiny shoes and business suits. Emily saw her immediately. She always noticed the ones everyone else didn't. "Good morning, ma'am," she said softly, her voice gentle. "Can I help you find a seat?" The woman smiled weakly. "Just some tea, dear. Haven't had breakfast yet." Emily guided her to a corner booth and poured her a cup herself, even though she wasn't supposed to. Self-service only. The manager always barked. The old woman's hands trembled slightly as she reached for the cup, spilling a few drops. "Take your time," Emily said kindly, grabbing napkins. "It's okay." But before the moment could settle, a group of well-dressed customers at the nearby table started whispering and laughing. "Look at her," one woman said under her breath. Probably another homeless person pretending to be polite. Emily froze, her stomach twisting. She wanted to ignore it. She should have ignored it, but she couldn't. "Ma'am," she said, turning to the laughing group, her voice steady but shaking underneath. "That woman is just trying to eat. Please stop." The laughter faded for a second, replaced by smug smirks. "Wow," one man said mockingly. "The waitress has a hero complex. Maybe she wants a medal." Emily clenched her fists but said nothing more. She just went back to the counter, pretending the sting in her chest was nothing. Minutes later, the old woman stood up, and suddenly, her leg buckled. She collapsed hard against the tiled floor, the teacup shattering beside her. The cafe went silent. Everyone stared. No one moved. Except Emily. She ran from behind the counter, kneeling beside the woman. "Ma'am, are you okay? Can you hear me?" The old woman groaned softly. Emily grabbed a towel, cushioning her head, calling out, "Someone, please, call an ambulance." But the crowd just stared, phones out, filming. The manager rushed over, not to help, but to hiss. "Emily, you're making a scene." Emily snapped, her voice cracking. "She's hurt. Forget the scene." And right then, the door swung open. A tall man in a tailored suit stepped in, his voice deep and urgent. What happened here? The entire cafe seemed to shrink, because everyone recognized him. Daniel Cole, billionaire, CEO of Cole Industries. The kind of man whose face was on every business magazine in town. He pushed through the crowd and froze when he saw who was on the floor. "Mom," he breathed. Daniel dropped to his knees beside the fallen woman, his hands trembling as he lifted her head gently. "Mom? Mom, can you hear me?" His voice broke, fear raw and real. The crowd gasped, and the people who had been laughing minutes earlier went pale. The old woman blinked weakly, her voice faint. "I just lost my balance, dear." The floor was wet. Emily knelt beside him, still holding the towel she'd used to cushion the woman's head. "I called for an ambulance," she said quickly. She hit her side when she fell. Daniel looked up at her, eyes wide with gratitude. "You helped her?" Emily nodded softly. "Of course. She needed someone." He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. Everyone else just stood there, he muttered, scanning the room. The same people who had been filming instead of moving. One by one, their phones lowered, faces red with shame. Within minutes, paramedics arrived, lifting the old woman onto a stretcher. Daniel walked beside her, never letting go of her hand. Before stepping out the door, he turned back to Emily. "Come with us," he said firmly. She blinked. "Sir, I can't. I work here." "Not anymore," he said, his tone soft but commanding. "You don't work for people who laugh when others fall. You work with people who stand up." The manager, trying to recover, rushed forward. "Mr. Cole, she was only doing her job." Daniel's gaze was sharp enough to silence him. If doing her job means being the only one with a heart in this place, then maybe she should be running it. The cafe went silent. The same group that mocked Emily now stared at the floor, guilt written across their faces. Later that afternoon, at the hospital, Daniel waited outside the room as doctors checked his mother. When they finally let him in, the old woman smiled faintly. "You came so fast," she whispered. He squeezed her hand. "I had help." She followed his gaze and saw Emily standing quietly in the doorway, still wearing her coffee-stained apron. "That's her?" the old woman asked. "The kind one." Daniel nodded. His mother's eyes softened. "I told you, son. You can tell who people really are when they think no one's watching." Daniel smiled faintly. "Yeah, Mom. You were right." He turned to Emily. "You said you were looking for something better, didn't you?" She frowned, confused. "Something better?" He reached into his coat, handing her a card embossed with the coal industry's logo. "You start Monday. Public relations. We could use someone who actually understands compassion." Her eyes widened, tears threatening. "Sir, I don't know what to say." "Just keep being you," he said simply. "That's all the world needs more of." A few days later, the cafe shut down. The video of the incident had gone viral. But it wasn't the laughter people remembered. It was the sight of one waitress kneeling beside a stranger while everyone else stood still. And in every headline that followed, the same message rang clear. The richest man in the city found his greatest treasure in a moment of humanity. 2 weeks later, the city buzzed with whispers. Newspapers ran headlines about the billionaire's mother and the mysterious waitress who had shown true compassion when no one else did. People shared the story online with words like faith in humanity restored. But Emily didn't care about fame. She was just trying to adjust to her new life. Gone were the long shifts, the greasy aprons, the rude customers. Instead, she walked through the glass doors of coal industries every morning, still unsure how she'd ended up there. Daniel met her in the lobby that first day, dressed sharp as ever, but with that same calm warmth in his eyes. "Ready?" he asked. She smiled nervously. "Still feels like a dream." He chuckled. "You earned it." The office staff watched curiously as he showed her around, whispers trailing behind them. Some didn't understand why a billionaire would hire a waitress with no degree, no background. But Daniel didn't care about their whispers. He'd seen something in her none of them had: heart. That afternoon, his mother arrived at the office, walking slowly but steady, her cane tapping softly against the marble floor. When Emily saw her, she immediately stood. "You shouldn't be up and about yet," she said gently. The older woman smiled. "Oh, dear, I've been up since before you were born. Sit, please." She reached for Emily's hands. "You didn't just help me that day. You reminded my son what decency looks like." Emily shook her head. "I only did what anyone should have done." The older woman smiled knowingly. "That's the problem, isn't it? Anyone should have, but only you did." Daniel walked in with 2 cups of tea, one for each of them. "Mom's been talking about starting something new," he said with a grin. His mother nodded. "A foundation for workers like you, dear. The ones the world overlooks until it needs them." She patted Emily's hand. "And I want you to help run it." Emily froze. "Me? I don't know the first thing about running anything." Daniel's mother chuckled. "You know how to care, child. The rest can be learned." Tears filled Emily's eyes as she looked at them both. I don't know what to say." Daniel leaned forward, his voice gentle but sure. "Then don't say anything. Just promise you'll never change that heart of yours." Outside the office window, the city stretched endlessly, glass towers and busy streets, a world always moving too fast. But for Emily, time finally slowed. She wasn't invisible anymore. She was seen, valued, and chosen, not for what she had, but for who she was. And somewhere deep inside, she knew that one act of kindness had rewritten the story of her entire life. A week later, the story hadn't left the city's headlines. Everywhere she went, people whispered her name, the waitress who stood up when everyone else froze. But Emily didn't crave the attention. What mattered to her was that the old woman had recovered, and that she now had a second chance at life she never thought she'd earn. Coal industries had changed, too. Daniel started showing up to meetings differently, not just as a billionaire, but as a man who'd been reminded that the smallest kindness could rewrite a legacy. And at the heart of it all was Emily, humble, genuine, still brewing coffee every morning for the office staff, even though she didn't have to. One evening, Daniel's mother invited her to dinner at their home. Emily hesitated outside the huge mansion, feeling small and out of place, until the door opened and the same woman she'd helped in that cafe smiled and said, "Come in, dear. Your family now." Over dinner, laughter filled the table. Daniel listened as his mother and Emily talked, their warmth spreading through the room like sunlight. You know, his mother said softly, money can build empires, but it can't buy what she has, heart. Daniel nodded. That's why she's not leaving my company. She's changing it. Emily blushed, shaking her head. I didn't do anything special. Daniel's mother smiled knowingly. That's what makes it special, my dear. You didn't have to think about doing good. You just did. Outside, the evening lights shimmered across the city skyline, the same city where people once mocked her for caring. Now they looked up to her as a reminder of what decency really looked like. When Emily left that night, Daniel walked her to her car. You've done something none of us could, he said quietly. She looked at him curiously. What's that? He smiled faintly. You made the richest people in this city realize what it means to be poor in heart. She didn't know what to say, so she just smiled back. The same kind, steady smile that started it all. As she drove away, Daniel's mother watched from the window, whispering to herself, the world doesn't need more power, it needs more people like her. If this story touched your heart, share it. Because kindness doesn't always wear a smile, and heroes don't always wear uniforms. Sometimes, they walk in covered in dust, carrying stories that could change your heart forever.